do to be more prepared next time we're faced with one of these crises?
You have to understand the crisis that you were in just recently and what some of those gaps were. So for example, inventory. But you don't want to make a rash decision. You want to give it a proper thought. So once we get through this in a couple of months, then you've got to really sit back and think very intellectually and in a very deep and meaningful way about how you address that. So it could be, inventory is the example that would be a great one here for this crisis. But in addition to that, I would take a look at other crises, potential crises that would come. So for example, I think the likelihood of us getting into a nuclear disaster or a nuclear fight is probably much, much, much less than some kind of bio warfare. That's probably a much more likely event, because think of how costly this was. How much did it cost China, say, to create this crisis? Not very much. And how much did it cost for them to spread the crisis? Essentially nothing. So you've got to think around, but to be honest with you, it's kind of like being a profiler on TV. You've got to try and think like the terrorist. So if you were a terrorist, you didn't have that much money, how would you go about that? And if you were able to create a virus, that would be a very good one. So that's one of the things I think that you could do. The other thing is, you've got to, as we were talking about saving your company, you've got to take a look at your cash reserves. Do you have enough cash reserves on hand? I think out of this crisis will come a new focus on the whole capital intensity side of the business, because people will make sure that they have more masks in place, more ventilators more in place. And in addition to that, I think more cash in place, particularly with public companies. Every quarter you talk about cash on hand, and you talk about that in terms of relative as well as absolute numbers. I think that relative number will increase pretty dramatically. I think the other thing that people will take a look at, which everybody looks at on a normal basis anyway, is travel. I think that's obviously, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, I think, but that's one of the industries I think was going to take a huge hit after this crisis. But I think in every company I've ever worked for, that's one area that we spent a lot of money in, and it was not looked at with the scrutiny which I think it really deserves, unless a company gets into a real bad crisis, financial crisis. So I think there's going to be a new focus on that. Can I have a conference on Zoom, or do I have to go in person? And there are times when you have to go in person, but I think people will look a lot more closely at that and determine if it's a real requirement or not.
Thanks for watching today. Use the code here for $100 off our premium subscriptions. You can find the link to our website, mentorship.club, and also the code in case you missed it in the description to the video. Make sure to also like and subscribe, and tune in next time for more quality videos with our world-class mentors that you won't be able to find anywhere else.